Once upon a time, when you wanted to get somewhere in a hurry and called a cab, this is what you got. Fred Jones earned his living like this for years, and today, at the age of 75, he still drives a cab. Only now it's rather a different kind of cab. Fred reckons there's more comfort sitting inside this on a rainy day than perched up on that little seat behind a hansom, even though sometimes he takes longer on a trip than he did with the old horse. Today, there are about 6,000 taxis in London alone, 2,000 fewer than before the war. And every one of the drivers gets his license here at the Public Carriage Office down Lambeth Way. That's after he's passed all the tests, of course. Some taxi drivers who are ex-servicemen get their training at the British Legion School. There are usually about 100 of them there at a time, and the course takes a year. Map reading, of course, comes into it in a big way, whether they go to a school or not. Many taxi drivers teach themselves, but they still have to prove they know their way about London. Ever wondered how a taxi learns to turn on a penny? Well, here, drivers are taught to turn completely round in 17 feet with only 3 movements. Reversing is another part of the course, and it usually attracts an audience. But for about half the year, the budding taxi driver is pedaling hard, finding his way around the streets, getting to know place names, finding those shortcuts which might make all the difference to the size of the tip after he's been stuck for 10 minutes in a traffic jam. "32-year-old Sidney Howard knows most of the shortcuts by now. He's been driving a taxi for 12 years and has had his own radio-controlled cab for the last 5.
House 6.
Will you go 272, 272, Seven Sisters Road?
272 Seven Sisters Road, Roger.
Thank you very much, House 6.
Requests for cabs are received by telephone girls in a central operations room.
Hello? You want to go to station? Hello? Yes, can I help you?
No.
33 Wavertree Road, yes. Stretton? SW16. And what's your name, please? Jones. And you want a taxi at 5:30?
The men's job is to brief the taxis over the radio.
Minicabs there. House 6, you're the closest cab. Will you go to 121, 121 Long Lane, Smithfield? 121 Long Lane, Smithfield, thank you.
Today, every 7th or 8th taxi in London is radio-controlled. 2 of the larger firms are run by the owner-drivers themselves. They pay a regular fee for the use and upkeep of the radio equipment and run the organisation by a committee of working taxi drivers. And working is the word. Every year, a taxi driver covers about 40,000 miles, and he carries about 40,000 passengers at an average fare of between 5 shillings and 7 and 6pence. Mile after mile, mile after mile. Getting to know street names, getting to know hotels, getting to know hospitals, getting to know landmarks, getting to know one-way streets. And then he'll be lucky if he manages to pass his street test in 8 months. Some never do it. And when he's passed that, he's still to face the special taxi driving test. To ensure a 24-hour service, London has 9,000 taxi drivers for 2/3 as many cabs. But only about 1/3 of them are owner drivers. The rest work for owners of fleets of cabs, most of them on a percentage basis. London's oldest and largest owners started in 1908 and have been going strong ever since. Their cabs get a daily wash and brush up and a careful inspection, all on an ultra-modern production line system. A big staff works around the clock to maintain the cabs in good working order. Each taxi has to be relicensed once a year, though the driver's license lasts for 3. And before this, every taxi is given a complete facelift. It gets an engine overhaul, its upholstery is repaired. And its bodywork is spruced up. Ever notice that most London taxis are black? That's to make respraying and touching up easier. Fred never had it so good when he drove his Hansom. This firm has a welfare section, a sports club, a snack bar, and even sends its drivers home by coach if they miss their last bus or train. Mile after mile, mile after mile. And when a driver feels like a cuppa, there's always the cabman's shelter, with a bit of company before he goes out on the road again. No driver is ever surprised to see someone inspecting his cab. He may be an examiner from the Public Carriage Office or a police officer. And if there's anything wrong with a taxi, he can send it off the road for repair immediately. Ever phoned a rank for a taxi? Here's someone who was lucky. When you think of a taxi meter, you think of that for hire flag. But modern meters don't have flags anymore. They have a lever or a press button instead. Well, that's certainly less effort for the driver. One big taxi meter factory is in Middlesex, and they send meters all over the world. The figure drums to record the fare are made first. Next comes the switch panel for the lighting control of the meter. The chassis is assembled, and all sorts of other parts. And finally, they're all set for a lot of testing before they're ready to tick up the miles and the shillings. Their testing period isn't over when they leave the factory. Next, they go to the National Physical Laboratories, who test them for the Metropolitan Police, usually for about 6 weeks. Meters in use also go back there for an annual test, but they stay only 24 hours. And then, just to make thoroughly sure, the meter is put on its taxi and given a road test by an officer of one of the 4 passing stations in London. If he's satisfied, the meter is sealed and stays sealed for another year, or until it goes wrong. This is the kind of jam that makes a driver wonder if he'll get a tip at the end of the journey.
Where are you? I'm stuck in a traffic jam.
House 6 got the customers waiting.
Well, what do you think I've got, a blooming helicopter?
Tips are going up these days. The average is probably between a shilling and 2 bob. Men are the best tippers, but drivers disagree over what kind of man gives the most. But they all say that people tip more when they're out enjoying themselves. He's still got a long way to pedal before those nice fat tips come his way. Miles and miles and miles.